So we've been talking about aquifers, and so I would like to tell you guys about the largest aquifer in the U.S., which is called the Ogallala. Yes, that's a real name for it. I didn't make it up. And it is the largest aquifer in all of the U.S. And you guys can see that it's in the Great Plains of the United States, so all down the middle of the country. And this aquifer is supplying, sorry about that, is supplying about 1/3 of all the groundwater that's used in the U.S., mostly for irrigation, because you guys can see it is in that farming area of the U.S. And so the southern half here is being pumped about 10 to 40 times faster than it can recharge. And you can see that in the picture here, although it's kind of old, is from 1997, right? The picture is very valuable because you can see that these levels down here are a lot lower, whereas up in the northern part of the aquifer, it's a lot deeper. And so, this is being pumped pretty seriously for irrigation. And so this causes lower water tables and can actually increase pumping costs. So one, you want you need more energy to pump when the water table is low. And also you're also going to need to have to drill further down, which will obviously increase costs as well. And so when you have aquifer depletion like this, there are lots of things that can happen in an ecosystem. Number one is that you end up with a high concentration of nitrates from fertilizers and pesticides. So this pollution from that farming area here is actually percolating down into the aquifer and contaminating the fresh water with these nitrates and pesticides. And that can, like I said, contaminate your aquifer with these kinds of pollutants. Not only that, when you have a decrease in fresh water, groundwater feeds wetlands, lake bottoms, right? It's a source of fresh water for many places. And when you don't have as much fresh water, new fresh water coming in, you have this decrease in biodiversity because the organisms there can't survive because there isn't enough fresh water for them. And so here's a little video. I'm not going to play it, a video within a video. But you guys should go into the shared drive and check this out. It actually gives you a good picture of what's happening in the Ogallala Aquifer. So, go and do that. So moving on, right? If we are over pumping our wells, that means that fresh water is being pumped out faster than is being recharged. And so a couple of things or lots of stuff can happen when that's occurring. It can cause the area around the well itself to go dry. And so because what was filled up with water before is now airspace. And so all that soil and rock that was held in place by water can actually collapse on itself. And that's where we get what you guys know as a sinkhole. The fancy word for it is land subsidence, where land is actually subsiding or sinking down. Another thing is that we will need to dig deeper wells. And so this is very expensive. And so the smaller farmers that can't afford to do that will end up losing their land, losing the farm. And so then you have that kind of economic loss when the water table drops. And finally, I want to talk about wells near coastlines. So when you're near a saltwater surface water, there is this interface between the fresh water and the salt water. And if I'm pumping a lot, you guys can look at this. My arrow is pointing at the picture below. Right, I'm sucking up water, and what that actually causes is the salt water to come into the freshwater aquifer. And so you end up with saltwater intrusion, where saltwater is intruding into your fresh water, and you could have contamination in your well, saltwater contamination. in your well. And so obviously we want to increase our water supply in however we can. Water is, they call it blue gold, because it really is very, very valuable, even though we don't charge a lot for it. Everyone needs water. Water is a super, super necessity. And so one way that we can increase our water supply is that we can reduce fresh water loss. And so here's a little chart here. So if you have a little leak, depending on the size of your drop, you can see how many gallons of water you are losing, which is, can be really extreme. You have a little leak like this, you're actually losing about 822 gallons per day, which is crazy. But 66% of the water that's used is actually lost through evaporation. Like I said, it's mostly irrigation that we're using water for, and the methods of irrigating are actually inefficient. And so, because water costs are so low, there's no incentive for farmers and industry to actually curb that water loss. So they just keep pumping more and more water. Another way to reduce freshwater loss is by increasing the price of water. And so obviously people feel it in their pockets, and it can encourage water conservation if the water prices are high. But this method is actually really difficult for people of low income. And so, for example, in South Africa, they have a set amount of free water for your basic needs. And if you exceed that use, then you pay a higher price. And so, this can be really difficult for people of lower income.